For the past 3 years, I've owned a modded Nintendo Switch. This is a console that I bought specifically with the purpose of modding. At the time, I was very interested in getting a handheld system that could play RetroArch and some of these older classic games, and in the end, I kind of moved away from actually using this device at all for RetroArch, and all I use it for now is playing regular Nintendo Switch games via backup copies. So every single year for the past now 3 years, I've made a video discussing my thoughts on owning a modded Nintendo Switch, and I've kind of came across maybe as seeming a little bit negative about it. It's a more expensive device to buy than obviously a regular Nintendo Switch unless you already happen to have one that can be modded, and I'll get into a little bit of an overview of that. But I've came across as somebody who thinks it's a little bit more of a hassle maybe than it's worth, and I'll give you the pros and cons in this video, but I can tell you that things have shifted in my mind, and it's a lot more worth it and a little bit easier than it used to be to maintain these devices because of some things I guess that I've learned along the way that maybe I didn't know a year or 2 years ago when I made those videos. Also, let's have to add the fact that it's crazy that the Switch is now like 5 years old, still is getting new games, even though it was an underpowered console when it first came out. It's really a testament to the fact that you can really put a lot of effort, maybe if you're a developer, into porting a game to get it to run well on here like Nier did, or there's still an interest in indie games and seeing some of these even older titles ported forward to be playable on a handheld console. Even with something like the Steam Deck out, the Switch is still extremely popular, both among kids and adults, and I think that that's absolutely awesome. But let's get into talking about the modding here in just a very general overview. If you have a system that has a moddable serial number, which I'll have some more information about that down in the description if you want to check if your serial number is modded, you can find that either on the barcode sticker on the bottom of the system or in your settings. If you have a moddable serial number, this is going to be some of the older Nintendo Switches like 2017, maybe some 2018 models if you've owned your console for that long, or if you bought it used and maybe the original purchaser did. You're able to mod the system just simply with a little plastic jig and some software. It's very easy, and it's the way that I did it. It's very straightforward. You don't need to open the system. You don't need to solder anything. It's pretty easy. Now, if you want to actually mod a system that doesn't have a moddable serial number, you can still do that, but it requires you to open the system and solder in a mod chip, and you also have to buy that mod chip, so it's a much more involved, more expensive process, and odds are, if you're this late in the Nintendo Switch life cycle and you haven't already put in your own mod chip, you're probably going to be looking at either buying a console that's already modded or paying somebody else to put in a mod chip for you. And I'm just assuming if you're getting into it this late, you're probably not tech savvy in that way. So if you want to buy an already modded system, I've talked before about the fact that if you don't do the whole process yourself and you don't really know the process, then maintaining a modded console is going to be a bit difficult. Adding games to it, updating it, things like that is going to be difficult. And I have complained about updating it in the past before, as updating the firmware on the system was a real pain, and it's became much easier due to some of the great homebrew tools out there. This isn't a big deal for me anymore. However, I do back up my SD cards every single time I update the system. And I say SD cards because I have two 256 gigabyte SD cards. I have had one of these SD cards completely fail out on me before. I've lost all my games that were on it. I use two SD cards for a reason. I don't just have one, 500 and some gigabyte SD card, because I could have bought one of those. It would have had the same amount of storage space as my two individual 256s, but the point is, if one of the cards corrupts, I can put in the other 256 gigabyte SD card, and because they have similar file structures with Atmosphere, the custom firmware, and while they might have different games on each one, I'm able to boot the system on that second card if the first card would go awry, and then at least I have a functioning system while I work out getting that backup copied over to the SD card. So like I said, originally I bought this with the intention of using the Switch for homebrew. I wanted to play RetroArch on it. I wanted to play these older classic games that you could play on it when you have it modded, but it seemed like those were the things that were getting me into the most trouble with having the system corrupted on the SD card and whatnot. And by just playing regular Nintendo Switch games, I've been very much in the clear, and I haven't had those sort of issues. Now, the drawback is obviously the fact that you can't play them online. You don't have access to Nintendo's online services whatsoever. I mean, I'm not even saying you could go online, see your friends list, browse the store. You can't do anything like that when you have a modded system. You'll be immediately banned, or roughly immediately banned. So you're operating totally offline, but one of the nice things about the Nintendo Switch is the portability aspect of it. Many games have, a relative wealth of offline content, so it does make them be playable, and there are means to getting the game updates even without, the Nintendo Switch online service where you traditionally get the game updates through. Also, the official classic games that come with the Nintendo Switch Online membership are accessible on a modded system. You can play those totally offline without the membership, and that's kind of a neat addition if you don't want to get into using something like RetroArch, where ultimately you could have a much wider library of older games to be able to access. But I do think that even without the online components, that's not a big enough drawback to take you away from wanting to play this system. It's an attractive system when you consider the fact that new games are still coming to it. The modding of it is relatively easy if you have a system that has a moddable serial number or you're able to obtain one. But I think that buying one of these outright for say $500-$600 already modded is not a good idea. I've said before, it's going to be difficult to maintain it if you didn't at first go through the steps yourself. You might not be sure how they set things up, and it's going to require a lot of reading later on to try and keep the system current and add new titles to it if you so choose. The cost of buying one of these systems already modded is pretty in line with just buying a Steam Deck, and at that point I would recommend you check out a Steam Deck as well as maybe some of the other mini PCs, as there are some Ryzen 7 mini PCs that can do some killer emulation. I mean, I'm talking things like PlayStation 3, even the Nintendo Switch are playable on some of these mini PCs with the Ryzen 7 chip, and they'll run you $500-$600 as well. So I think it really is that simple to decide. If you already have a Nintendo Switch that has a moddable serial number and you can get this up and running yourself for, what efficiently was a $300 purchase initially, and you're okay with walking away from Nintendo's online services, or maybe you have a second Nintendo Switch like I do that you can still use to play games like Splatoon 3 online that you have a cartridge for, then I would recommend you consider modding your system. But if you don't have a system yet, or you can't find a system for, say $250 used, that happens to have a moddable serial number, maybe the person selling it has no idea that that's the case, then I would not recommend you buy a pre-modded system for $500 or $600 or pay a premium for a system that's being sold as one that's not modded but has a moddable serial number. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Bailey, and I will see you in the next video.